Picture this. The golden sun of the Mediterranean dawn breaking over a city not ruled by emperors in togas, but by a queen crowned with the uraeus of the Nile. Not a Rome echoing the Latin cries of senators, but one alive with the fragrance of lotus incense and the rhythmic chants of priests from Alexandria. Imagine a Rome not centered on the might of Caesar or the austerity of Stoic generals, but one reshaped by the intellect, charm, and unshakable ambition of Cleopatra VII, Egypt's last great pharaoh. What if history had taken a different turn? What if Cleopatra, instead of being remembered as a tragic figure entangled in the downfall of Mark Antony, had risen above the Roman civil wars and seized control of the empire herself? What if, through cunning diplomacy, strategic alliances, or even military might, she had planted the flag of Egypt in the heart of Rome? In this alternate timeline, we might find ourselves in a world where Latin is no longer the dominant tongue of intellectualism and empire. Instead, perhaps it's merged with ancient Egyptian, a strange but beautiful fusion of hieroglyphic elegance and Roman structure. Roman legions, once the hammer of Western conquests, might now move in formation not to the call of a Roman centurion, but to the hypnotic cadence of Egyptian drums, their standards adorned not just with Roman eagles, but also the symbols of Horus and Isis. This isn't just speculation for the sake of fantasy. It's a bold reimagining of how our entire civilization could have been fundamentally different. What if Cleopatra had not only stood against Rome, but had rewritten it? What you're about to hear isn't the history you learned in school. It's the history that could have been. A tantalizing glimpse into a past re-scripted by the ambition of one of the most iconic leaders the world has ever known. Cleopatra VII. Her name alone conjures images of luxury, allure, and power. But beneath the seductive legends and Hollywood dramatizations lies a far more complex, formidable figure. She wasn't merely the temptress of Caesar and Antony, she was a polyglot queen, a master strategist, and the last pharaoh of one of the world's most ancient civilizations. At just 18 years old, Cleopatra ascended to the throne of Egypt amid political chaos, economic strain, and external threats from the ever-expanding Roman Empire. And yet, she didn't just endure, she thrived. Fluent in as many as a dozen languages, including Egyptian, an extraordinary feat even among her Greek-speaking Ptolemaic predecessors, Cleopatra was known for her intellect and sharp political acumen. She wasn't simply an accessory to powerful men, she was their equal and in many ways, their superior. Her liaisons with Julius Caesar and later with Mark Antony were not merely affairs of the heart, but calculated alliances designed to protect and empower Egypt in an age of Roman domination. But here's the twist: what if she hadn't settled for influence from the sidelines? What if Cleopatra had gone beyond survival and manipulation? What if she had conquered the very power that sought to swallow her kingdom? What if, instead of Egypt falling into Rome's grip, it was Rome that bowed to the Sphinx? In this episode, we peel back the layers of myth and dive headfirst into the captivating realm of alternate history. We'll explore the tantalizing possibility of an Egyptian-led Roman Empire, with Cleopatra at its helm. A world where the balance of power, culture, religion, and gender could have been radically, and perhaps permanently, altered. This is more than a what if, this is a window into the world as it might have been, shaped by one of history's most underestimated and iconic leaders. But before we dive into this alternate reality, let's hit pause and turn the question over to you. Take a moment and imagine. What would our world look like if Cleopatra had succeeded in taking control of Rome? Not just influencing it through diplomacy or love, but ruling it outright as the empress of a combined Egyptian-Roman superpower. Would the face of leadership have changed forever? Could Cleopatra's ascent to power have opened the doors for women in politics, not centuries later, but millennia sooner? Might female rulers have become the norm rather than the exception across Europe, Africa, and Asia? And what of culture and science? Would the great flourishing of art, philosophy, and innovation we associate with the European Renaissance have instead emerged in Alexandria, a city already bursting with libraries, scholars, and invention. Imagine a Renaissance born not in Florence, but in the shadows of Egyptian obelisks and Greco-Roman temples along the Nile. The possibilities are endless, but here's where you come in. Drop your wildest, most creative, or most thoughtful theories in the comments. Would Cleopatra have become history's first feminist icon? Would hieroglyphs adorn the marble arches of Europe? Would religion, philosophy, even our modern borders look completely different? I'll be reading every one, and I'll personally reply to some of the most imaginative and insightful answers. So go ahead, rewrite history with me in the comments section below. Let's see what alternate timeline you would build. Let's turn back the clock to a turning point in ancient history, 44 BCE. The Ides of March. Julius Caesar, the towering figure of Roman politics and Cleopatra's most powerful ally, has just been assassinated in the heart of the Roman Senate. Rome plunges into chaos. The empire's future is suddenly up for grabs. Factions splinter, loyalties shift, and the vacuum of power is wide open. In our known timeline, Cleopatra retreats to Egypt. She watches and waits as Rome tears itself apart in civil war. But what if she hadn't? What if, instead of withdrawing, Cleopatra had struck while the iron was hot? In this alternate version of history, Cleopatra doesn't mourn Caesar's death from afar, she mobilizes. With unmatched urgency, she places her son, Caesar Ion, publicly claimed as Julius Caesar's biological heir, at the center of a bold political campaign. Young, royal, and bearing Caesar's bloodline, Caesar Ion becomes Cleopatra's ultimate trump card. Not just a child, but a living symbol of continuity and legitimacy. And Cleopatra? She's not just a grieving lover, she becomes a queen with a mission. Armed with Egypt's immense wealth, the grain stores, the gold, the fleets, she turns her kingdom into a war chest. She reaches out to Roman senators still loyal to Caesar, disillusioned generals, and provincial governors who see opportunity in a new alliance. Through shrewd diplomacy and bribes written on papyrus and sealed with the royal cartouche, Cleopatra could have peeled away support from Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and eventual first emperor of Rome. With Caesar's name and Egypt's resources, Cleopatra had the pieces to build an empire of her own. All she needed was the boldness to act. And in this version of history, we say she does. Now, close your eyes and imagine a world reborn, a majestic hybrid of Roman might and Egyptian splendor. In this re-envisioned empire, the traditional seat of Roman power is transformed. Instead of the familiar marble halls of Rome, the venerable Senate finds its home in the bustling, sun-kissed city of Alexandria, where the shimmering Mediterranean meets the scholarly spirit of antiquity. The debates and decrees of the Senate reverberate through streets lined with both Roman columns and Egyptian obelisks, a living testament to the fusion of cultures. Envision the cityscape where monumental Roman forums, the very heartbeat of civic life, stand shoulder to shoulder with resplendent temples dedicated to Isis, the goddess of magic, fertility, and rebirth. The sacred precincts of Isis are not only places of worship, but also hubs of social life and intellectual debate, where priests and scholars mingle with senators and merchants. This blending creates a vibrant tapestry where ancient religious traditions meet Roman pragmatism, and every corner of the city pulses with a dual heritage. In this extraordinary civilization, progress and tradition walk hand in hand. It is a society where the rigorous logic of Roman engineering and law fuses seamlessly with the mystical insights of Egyptian spirituality. Here, science, mysticism, and innovation are not at odds, but are celebrated as complementary forces that drive humanity forward. Education becomes the currency of power and wisdom, flourishing under Cleopatra's enlightened patronage. Institutions of learning expand across the empire, nurturing a generation of scholars, inventors, and visionaries who embrace both analytical thought and poetic mysticism. Remarkably, under this regime, women gain a prominence that had long been denied in our traditional history. In this Rome-Egypt hybrid, female leaders, thinkers, and artists not only contribute to but often lead the cultural and political dialogues of the era. The matriarchal influences rippling from Cleopatra's reign reshaped society, paving the way for more inclusive decision-making and a redefinition of power that spans every class and sphere of life. And then, consider the transformative ripple effects on religion and spirituality. Christianity, a faith that was still in its embryonic stages, might have unfolded along a very different trajectory under the guidance of a matriarchal regime steeped in ancient spiritual traditions. Rather than a narrative dominated by patriarchal interpretation, Christian teachings could have intertwined with the deep, symbolic heritage of Egyptian mysticism, offering a rich, alternative spiritual landscape that reverberated with the legacy of Isis, Hathor, and other revered deities. In this alternate reality, Cleopatra doesn't just rule a changed Rome. She crafts a civilization where disparate threads of history merge into a single, extraordinary tapestry. It is a world where monumental architecture, cultural dynamism, and progressive ideals coalesce, forging a legacy that continues to fascinate and inspire our imaginations today. Now, let's fast forward 2 full millennia into the future. Imagine the modern world not as we know it, but as it could have been, shaped from the foundations of a Cleopatra-led empire. The ripple effect of one woman's triumph would not have ended in the ancient world. It would have sent shockwaves through the centuries, altering everything from global empires to the way we govern ourselves today. Would the British Empire, the colossus that came to dominate a quarter of the globe, ever have existed? Or would the geopolitical balance have shifted so dramatically that Europe's rise as a colonial superpower never occurred? In a world where Alexandria, not London or Paris, became the hub of empire, perhaps it was Egyptian fleets, not British ones, that explored new continents, spread influence, and shaped trade routes. The maps we grew up with, centered on the Atlantic, might have revolved around the Mediterranean and the Nile. And what of language and culture? In our timeline, Arabic became the dominant tongue across North Africa following the rise of Islam. But if Cleopatra had forged a pan-Mediterranean empire blending Egyptian and Roman elements, could that region have followed a different path? Perhaps Coptic, or a Greek-Egyptian fusion, might have remained the lingua franca of vast territories, spreading alongside a deeply rooted cultural tradition that celebrated both ancient science and divine femininity. In this world, hieroglyphs might still adorn holy texts, and Alexandria's influence could have overshadowed Mecca, Byzantium, and even Rome. Now think about the core of how we govern. The Roman Republic, for all its flaws, laid the groundwork for what would eventually become modern democratic institutions. But what if that legacy had been eclipsed by an Egyptian political model, one rooted in councils, priesthoods, and community governance? What if Cleopatra's reign had reimagined power as something more communal, more spiritually integrated, or even more inclusive of women and the marginalized? Would modern democracy look less like senates and more like sacred assemblies under stars and sky? And this isn't just about Cleopatra the woman. It's about Cleopatra, the pivot point in history. The woman who, had she acted just a bit sooner, with just a bit more support, might have rewritten not just the fate of Egypt or Rome, but the entire DNA of Western civilization. Because sometimes, all it takes is one powerful person, one audacious vision, to set history on a completely different course. Cleopatra didn't conquer Rome. But maybe, just maybe, her legacy still conquers our imagination. She wasn't just a queen, a lover, or a political mastermind. She was a woman who dared to defy the expectations of her time, carving out a space where power, beauty, and intellect converged. And while history might not have allowed her to wear the crown of Rome, it has certainly crowned her in the minds of countless dreamers and history lovers. Cleopatra's story isn't one of conquest, it's one of potential unrealized, of what could have been, had circumstances, ambition, and timing aligned just slightly differently. And therein lies the beauty of alternate history. It teaches us that while the past is fixed, the future is wide open. History is often shaped by those who dare to imagine differently, who think beyond the confines of what's been done before. Cleopatra wasn't just playing the game of power, she was reshaping the very rules of the game. She challenges us to think about what might have been, and perhaps more importantly, what could be in the future. So, ask yourself this: what if the future belongs not just to those who win, but to those who dare to imagine differently? What if the greatest achievements come not from conforming to the world as it is, but from dreaming of a world that could be? If you loved this mind-bending journey through time, go ahead and hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more alternate history deep dives like this one, where we rewrite the past to understand the future. Ring that bell so you never miss a what-if scenario that could change how you see the world. Until next time, keep asking the questions history forgot to answer. Keep imagining, keep dreaming, and remember, sometimes the most powerful force in history isn't the sword, it's the vision.